Today we're at Government Bay on Lake Sakakawea visiting with fisheries biologist Russ Kinsler about salmon fishing. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Russ, give our viewers a little background on the fishery, salmon fishery in Lake Sakakawea.
The bulk of the fishing occurs on the lower part of the lake, basically right next to the dam, along the face of the dam and the east and west shores next to it. Most of the angling that takes place for salmon is they use downriggers, and they start in late July, mid to late July, and fish through August and into September with downriggers. They're getting down to where the thermocline is, which is where the warmer water above it and colder water below it. And that's kind of where the smelt, which is the main food for the salmon, like to hang out, and that's where the salmon hang out. So that's where they're fishing with the downriggers. Anybody can fish salmon though, because in September the salmon move shallow to start to spawn, and then they can be caught from shore using crankbaits, a bobber with a worm on it, and that usually occurs starting in Labor Day is when they move shallow, and then they can shore fish them all the way through the middle to late part of October. Salmon can be caught lake wide. When early in the year the water is cold lake wide, there can be salmon caught up as far as White Earth. We hear of salmon caught in Van Hook. So you don't have to fish the lower end of the lake to catch salmon. There are other areas. It's just this is the most popular spot.
Russ, we would not have salmon in Lake Sakakawea if it wasn't for the Game and Fish Department fisheries crew.
Correct. Yeah, salmon don't spawn naturally in Lake Sakakawea. We don't have the clear, fresh, cold water streams for them to spawn. So when salmon spawn, their young return to where they were spawned. So by us spawning the salmon and stocking them, the salmon are returning to where we put them. So every year in October we go out and we collect salmon, and currently we use an electrofishing boat to catch the salmon in the backs of the bay, like Government Bay here. And we collect the salmon, we haul them down to the hatchery, and we'll spawn them there. The hatchery then takes the eggs, incubates them, hatches them, and raises them up. And then usually in late April, we'll go down and we'll tag a percentage of the salmon before they get released back into the lake late April or early May.
Russ, how many salmon did we stock in Lake Sakakawea this year?
This year we stocked just over 479,000 salmon. So our goal was to stock 400,000 salmon, but the hatchery was able to raise a few extra, so we put them in the lake as well.
Russ, how many did we tag this year?
We tagged about 40,000 salmon total this year. So
what's the purpose of tagging, I guess?
We tag the salmon, one, so we can see how old the salmon are when they come back. We'll get ages on them. Also to see where they're coming back to, where they're moving to. Another real advantage to that now is that, like, we've had years where we've had lots of flow through the dam. We can then see how many salmon are going through the dam. And as it turns out, most of the salmon that are below the dam, people think that they're South Dakota salmon because we don't stock salmon below the dam. Well, the tagging has told us that they're not South Dakota salmon. There are salmon that have just passed through the dam at some point in their life. So. And
how do you know if you have a tagged fish?
Okay, if you catch a salmon and the adipose fin, which is the small fleshy lobe towards the tail end of the fish on its dorsal of the top side, if that's missing, then there's a good chance there's a tag in the salmon's head. And then we just ask anglers to cut the head off, and they can turn it into the Game and Fish office here in Riverdale, the Game and Fish office in Bismarck, or at the gas station in Pick City, Scott's Bait and Tackle, or the gas station in Riverdale under new ownership, Real Convenience it's called now. You can drop them off there and they'll gladly take them and take your information, and I'll get a letter back to you sometime next spring with information on your fish, and then also on how the fishery was and the salmon spawn was the previous year.
Okay. Russ, you mentioned smelt, it's their main forage. How is the smelt population in Lake Sakakawea?
The smelt population is doing really good. It's been good for a long time, actually, and that's mainly due to we've had high water levels for a long time. We were a little concerned coming into this spring because the lake was down. The forecast, we were kind of in a drought and it wasn't looking good. But as everybody knows, we got Montana got a bunch of water, and the lake has come up, 6+ feet here in the last month, and then that's definitely going to help. We actually got a little rise early this spring, which should help the smelt spawn, and so the future looks good for salmon and other species that utilize smelt in the lake.
And the big question is, how is salmon fishing going to be this year?
Well, I don't like to make predictions on how fishing is going to be, but Anglers were catching salmon this spring, right at ice out, and that's something that they used to do all the time, and it seemed like they went through a few years where it wasn't very common that you hear of anglers catching fish in the spring, but it's getting to be more common again, where there's anglers out here by the dam catching fish. They're also over by the Audubon pumping plant, the 83 embankment. They're catching salmon out there in the spring right at ice out. So when I hear that, I think that it should be a pretty decent year of salmon fishing, I think.
A lot of great information, Russ. Thank you.
Thank you.